My name is Professor Stuart Hooper. I'm from Monash University in Australia, and today what I want to talk to you about is aeration of the lung at delivery. Now, when you're born by a Cesarean section or vaginal delivery, you will have a certain amount of liquid in your airways. And the question is, how do you clear that liquid, particularly after you take your first breath? Now, that liquid is cleared down through the airways where the liquid then enters into the tissue and then cleared from the tissue. We can immediately see that there's actually three phases to this. And so when we're thinking about pulmonary ventilation at birth, we have to bear in mind each of these three phases. The first phase is when the airways are liquid filled, and the issues here are that liquid then has to move through the airways. This can be quite short, only being 30 seconds to 5 minutes. The second phase is when the liquid is actually residing in the tissue, and essentially during this time you have an edematous lung. Problem with this is that it increases interstitial tissue pressure and it increases the likelihood of airway reflooding. The duration of this is approximately 4 hours. And then the third phase is the phase which probably you're more familiar with, which is where you can focus on blood gas and respiratory gas homeostasis. So if we just take, for instance, the first phase, how do we move liquid through our airways? And there's really been three proposed mechanisms. The first mechanism is where you increase transpulmonary pressure, particularly if the infant is forced into dorsoventral flexion. That'll increase transpulmonary pressure and you'll lose liquid via the nose and mouth. And this explains what happens with the gushes of fluid as soon as the head is delivered. The second phase is sodium reabsorption, and the third phase is the increase in transpulmonary pressures that are generated during inflation or inspiration of the lung. And it's this third phase which is the predominant phase that drives airway liquid clearance. And just to show you how this works and how quickly it can happen, here's a FISMA Graph recording of a spontaneously breathing term rabbit pup. We can see that with the increase in gas volume with each subsequent breath, you accumulate FRC. So with this first breath, there's an accumulation of around about 6 mils per kilogram or more. And we can take an image before and see how much air is in the lung. There's not much. And we can take an image immediately after, which is less than a second later, and we can see quite a bit of air has accumulated into the lungs. And this equates to a flux rate of around about 32 litres per kilogram per hour of liquid exiting the airways entering the surrounding tissue. So what is the effect of actually this liquid entering into the tissue? Well, it has a big effect. We can see that here. This is a measure of interstitial tissue pressure in the periovular tissue immediately after birth. And we can see that because the tissue has fixed finite volume and you're increasing the liquid that has to enter that fixed finite volume, the pressure has to go up. And we can see here, so the increase in pressure is liquid going into the tissue, and then this decrease in pressure is due to liquid being removed from the tissue over a 4-hour period. And then gradually it becomes more subatmospheric, and it stays subatmospheric for the rest of our lives. What is the cause of this? Well, as I've said, it's due to liquid moving into the tissue. We can actually see this in effect. So here's another image of a spontaneously breathing rabbit pup at term. These are two images superimposed on one on top of the other. One has been reversed, and we can see the white rib position is the position of the ribs before lung aeration, and the black rib position is the same pup at the end of lung aeration. You quite clearly see that the chest wall has expanded, and the chest wall has expanded to accommodate the increase in air and liquid that still remains in the chest. This is the reason why the chest wall needs to be compliant at birth, because if it wasn't compliant and it was very stiff, then what would happen is that we would get a greater increase in interstitial pressure, which would increase the likelihood of liquid to re-enter back into the airways. The way in which nature normally deals with this is that the baby closes its glottis, grunts, and pressurises the airways and to prevent the liquid re-entry. But in intubated animals or babies, we can still use CPAP or PEEP to provide an end expiratory pressure to resist this entry of liquid back into the airways. So in summary, airway liquid clearance predominantly results from pressure gradients generated by inspiration and or inflation. Airway liquid clearance into the perialveolar tissue increases tissue pressures and the potential for liquid to re-enter the airways. which has the potential to reduce FRC and reduce lung compliance. Thank you.